You can hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. There's some problem with audio.
Hello.
Yes. Yeah. So we'll talk about this API testing. Let me share the screen. So basically, it's like why we need API testing, right? So generally, we have like a front-end screen and back-end database, right? So normally, they don't directly access the database from the UI because of some maintenance problems. So there will be like a middle layer, right? So middle layer is basically the APIs. So whenever, like say, application screen, right, want to access backend database, it's going to talk to the API, right? API is just a functional code, some kind of code. So that will reach the backend database, get the database from backend, and give it to the application screen. So something like if we have like a login screen, right? So when you input like username, password in the front end screen, right? So that will not directly go to the database. So there will be API call, something like login. So that will reach the database and it will validate the username. Then it will give a response to the screen that it is successful. Then the UI screen will show the next screen for successful login, right? So basically the API is the middle logic between the database and the UI screen. So that is the main importance of API. So normally what you do in a database, right? You read records from the database, right? Or you update records, like you insert records, you update records, or you delete records, right? These are the four things. When you access database, you just want to read data from database, or you insert records into the database, or you update records, or you delete records. So these are the four things you normally do on a data.
Sir, is there any relationship between API test and SQL database?
No, there is no relation. SQL is basically you are directly accessing the database, right? SQL is you connect to the database and you directly run the queries on the database, right? So that is basically direct access. API is through the programming, right? So basically the developers will write this API, right? So it will access through the developer's code, right? So when you are doing through API, you are not directly accessing the database, you are accessing the data through this program. So it's kind of a security level, and also it will hide a lot of other things for the application. Right, the main point is like the UI developer, they don't normally directly access the database. That is not for security purpose and for other project related issues to minimize the risk, right? UI doesn't directly access the database tables and all, right? So they will access through this APIs, so that whenever there is some change in the database, so the UI doesn't need to change. Suppose like say after some time, they upgraded database tables and things like that, so they can simply update this API program, so that in the UI there won't be any change, right? They don't need to change the UI. They just need to access the API and they can get the latest data. Similarly, whenever there is change in the front end, they don't need to update the back end, right? The API will work even there is a front end change. So if they access the same API, it will still work. Right? It will basically minimize some risk and things like that. So this is mostly for accessing data from database through program. Right? When you are doing SQL, you are directly interacting with the database, but not with API. Right?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So basically, just like you do database operations in the API, there are like 4 operations: get, post, put, and delete. So get is basically reading data, right? Post is inserting data. Put is updating data, and delete is deleting data. Right? These are the 4 methods used in any REST API. So they call it as REST API, RESTful API for web applications. So these are the 4 methods to access data: get, post, put, and delete. Right? This is REST is basically some like definition of protocol, how to read data from a database and transfer it to the like various layers. Right? It's a development terminology. So this is basically main logical choice for building APIs. Right? Whenever somebody builds APIs, these are the 4 methods they use for building APIs, right? So,
Sir, what tools we can use for API testing?
yeah, I will
Zero,
explain that.
zero.
Yeah, I will let me finish this, then I will explain this. So basically, this is the get method, right? Get method is used to extract information from given server using URI. URI basically like a URL, right? You give some URL, it will read the data from through that URL and reads extract data. The post is basically to create new entity, like inserting records and all that. So it will send data to server, like customer information, file upload and all that. Put is to create new entity or update existing one. So this is for update, right? Delete is remove all current representations of target resource by a given URL, right? So you're basically accessing through these URLs. So these 4 methods you should understand, right, in API. Then, so there is ways to test APIs. So when you're
Sir, where to
interacting,
pass that URL in Postman?
yeah, Postman is a tool to use the URL and send data, right? The testing tool,
Yes,
right?
sir. In Postman itself, how to pass that URL to test?
Yeah, I will explain. So, so basically, so for testing this API, so you need some tool. That's a Postman tool and some other tool. I will just show you the Postman tool today. If you are in Linux, there is a tool called curl, curl tool in Linux. But for UI, we use like Postman tool, and there is some other tools also there. I'll just show you that. So this is one example of testing a REST API. Suppose we have this URL, right, which we're going to test. So let me show you. I'll just open this URL, right? So this is the output from this URL, right? So this is basically we are reading some data, right? So this is kind of a GET request, right? So we can launch like this is another tool. So we have this Postman tool. Let me show you here. So you can actually install this tool, actual Postman tool. You can download and install it in your system, right? So you can do
Yes,
like
sir. I
some,
installed it.
yeah. can do just a new request and do a get request, right? You can just put like some name, right? Get request test or something. They are doing some work here. Then just collection is basically some folder that you can group all your tests, right? So we are just creating a name for this. That is here. So here, right? So this is our folder, and we have like this is the name of the method we are testing, right? So here, if you see, there is a get, post, put, and delete, right? These are four, and there is other options as well. We don't need to worry about those, but get, post, put, and delete are there. So if you're using get, so you can put get and the URL, right? Request URL. So you can take this URL, put it here, right? So basically what it will do, it will send this request to the server. Just like when you are browsing, right? When you put enter, it will send a request to the server. So the Postman will simulate that scenario. So here you have send, right? So if you click send, it will run through that URL and fetch the data. See, this is the data output coming from the server, right? And as yesterday I showed, right, status code. So this is the status code 200, right? So like how much time it took to get the response back, what is the data size and all that. So this is the output. So this is a simple example of a get request, right? So similarly, I think you gave like one URL, right, in the morning. So that is also a get request. Let me show you this. So this is the get request. So you can put it here. You can click send. So this is the data it is returning back for your API call, right? So status 200 is it ran successfully and gave this output. So when application is integrating this API, right? So they're going to display this data on the screen, right? So when you're testing screen related to this, you need to validate whatever data is here is displayed on the UI screen. So that is the logic. And this is how you do get request. So like this, right? So you have get method and you put your request URL, click the send button. It will run the UI test, right?
Okay, sir. For this, I have to write test cases, so, sir. How
Like
we are
get,
performing.
yeah, like see, so when you're writing test case, you say like when you run the URL and click send, so you should get the data back and the status should come like 200, right? If there is an error,
Sir, what is run preview?
this is the format basically. Like normally it comes like this data, right? You cannot read it. It just formats the code data into readable format. That's it.
I have to write test cases for these also, sir.
No,
Not
this is the tool basically. This is basically Postman tool will format it. You don't need this. Basically, you want the output coming back with status 200, right? This is basically to readability to
So
format
I
it.
need to perform for get, put, post, and delete, sir.
Yeah. No, but post and all they have to give. They give only get request for you.
Okay.
It will not work for post. See, if you run for post, it will give error. It says 404, right? Not found. So whatever API they gave you, it is only get API, right? To fetch data. So for post, there will be a separate request. For put also, there will be a separate request, and delete also, there will be a separate request.
So for every request, they will give some URL, right, sir?
Yeah. Every request, they will give a separate URL. And here there is no input parameters, but so when you do post, there will be some input parameters also, right? You have to send data, right? So there will be
Yes.
some input parameters as well for post request. Okay, so let me finish this part. So you put the URL and you, so that is get request, right? Suppose you are doing post, right? You want to select post, right? And you put some URL, and so there will be some headers and all. Right? We have to send some extra data for post request, right? Say suppose you are inserting employee record, you have to send like first name, last name, employee ID, and all that, right? So they will give format how to send data. Let me show you some example. This is actually update, right? So you'll send up data like this. Say we are sending some status and all. So they'll give this format, right?
Okay.
You have to send this data. That's why it's so this format they will give. So there will be values. You have to put some values and send it, right?
Okay, sir. By clicking on new, I have to create. Can you tell me that one
Yeah, if
also?
it is
Well,
for a new records, right? So here is the post request, right? So the post request, in the body section, right, will send the data part, right?
okay.
So then when you send, it will add that record into that. So just like you, like say when you look at database, you insert record, you update record, you delete record, and you read, right? You do select statement. So in the API also, you have get
That is
request.
by querying, sir.
Huh?
But in SQL, we will select, update, delete. All will be done by through querying. Here, they
Yeah,
will give URL uh,
yeah,
and parameters like
parameters, yeah,
state.
parameters they will give. Yeah. So this is actually custom code. For each application, it will be different. It's not same for all applications, right? Each project, this data will be different.
Okay.
So it's not same for all projects. Like say SQL queries is same for database, right? So if you take MySQL database, SQL queries are same, but this API calls are different for each project. It's not same.
Okay.
Okay, so say here you see whenever you send post request, you have to go to the body tab and you have to enter this data, right? Whatever the format it is accepting, put it there. Then you can do the run send part. Then you can click the send part. Right? You can send part. So similarly, post, post, put and delete. So you should see this. This is the table. You should note it down. Like you maybe save a copy of this table, because whenever there is a success, you'll get 200. Like I showed here, right? So you'll see.
Yes, sir.
So this one failed, right? 401 unauthorized. That means there is no permission to run this query. So you can see here what is 401 unauthorized, right? So if you are not clear about what is this code, you can search actually Google 401 unauthorized, it will give some explanation of what is that code, right? So it says it will give some details like why it came as 401. Suppose user does not have access to run the query, right? It will give 401 unauthorized access. So like that, all these codes will come, right? Bad request, 404 not found. Suppose you do like a, let us see, there is one here. So your URL is not correct, right? Let us say, I'll put some extra data. It will give like not found or some error. Enable the validation proper. They're giving something. Okay, let us this says could not get any response. We should see some error. Do an error. Okay, so it's not responding. So if you give a wrong URL, right, it will say not found, something like that, right? So you should also note down these response codes. So when you are testing, right, sometimes you want to test if you give a wrong URL, it is giving like incorrect 404. If you give correct data, giving 200. So if you send like incorrect data, right, it should give proper errors and all. So that's so when you're doing like post, if you insert twice, right, should probably give like duplicate record or things like that. So those kind of errors you can check.
Okay, sir.
Right. Suppose say for employee, right? Employee you can insert only once, one particular name, right? So if you try to insert employee twice, should give some like duplicate ID or something like that, right? Some error. So those kind of scenarios you're going to test in the APIs.
Okay, sir. Sir, how many test cases can I write regarding this URL?
No, for whatever URL they gave you, that is only one get scenario, right? So one scenario for successful fetch, and if you give like a wrong URL, should give error. That's it. For get, there is no like major scenarios. Post will have other scenarios. Get you have like only one scenario, and you just validate that data is correct. Data is coming back after get,
Okay.
right?
So only one test case is enough
Yeah.
regarding that URL, sir.
But if see if that data is displaying on the UI, you can verify it on the UI. Like if same details are coming on the UI. Is there a corresponding UI screen for that API?
No, sir. They just gave that URL. That's it.
Okay. So you can just like you run the URL. You should see that code should be 200 and it will fetch the data, right? And if you give like a wrong URL, it should give like 404.
Two scenarios. One is positive and one is negative. Right, sir?
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And basically, so the output should be like they gave output, right? You can mention like expected result should be, it should be coming in this format. Should come like this. Object, right, should have ID. company name, company ID, description, longitude, latitude, and all. So you can mention these fields. These values should
Test
come.
data, sir, or
Yeah.
expected result.
This is called key value, like on ID and value. So this is the key name. This is the value. Key name and the value. So this is one record. This is one record. This is another record. This is another
We
record.
can fetch through this key record and value, sir.
Yeah. So you can mention like you should record return records with this key value combination, right?
Okay.
So that is how we test. So and
Or
these,
can I add screenshot of the sir records
yeah, if you
to?
test, you can add a screenshot as a test result and send it to them from Postman, right? And these are various response codes. Um, so basically, so they are like some of the challenges. Suppose we are only testing here one API, right? Like if you do like insert, update, delete, this keeping the parameter values will be problem, right? Um, so these are
Sir,
some
how to recognize that URL is either get or post related to get or post?
that is the developers will have to give the details, right? Developers, they won't write the code. They need to tell you this is a get request, this is a post request, and put request
No,
and
sir.
all.
I gave URL to you, no, sir. Uh, you
No,
said
but
that is
here they see they mentioned clearly here, right? This is to fetch employee records. That's what they said, right?
okay.
So this fetch means reading data. So if they say like insert or update, then it will become like put request or post request. So that's why um, I thought like it is a get request, right? So these are some of the issues you face while testing APIs, right? So sometimes there will be multiple parameters you need to pass, like this other request. Uh, so you have to send like user ID, uh, different parameters. You need to format it correctly. So if you don't give this combination correctly, right, it will not work. This is a key value pairs. You know, like JSON format, right? You understand JSON format? It's a key
Yes,
value.
sir.
Yeah.
This
So if
is
you
the
don't,
JSON format, right, sir?
yeah. So if you miss this key value, right? Suppose if you instead of saying user ID, you say user right, it will not work. It will give some error. But right now it's saying unauthorized because there is no. You need to log in and then work. But if you change these key values, it will fail. It will not test the API correctly. Yeah, that you need to say. And sequencing API calls as per the order, right? So like whenever you're testing, these four methods will be there: get, post, delete, and put. So you need to check response code, response message, response body in API testing, right? Response code is this one. This is the response code. Response body is this, right? And response body, response message. Message is nothing but this. C200. Yeah. Test results. And same thing, you can check it in the Google Inspect tool also. Suppose you are testing some UI application. Yesterday I showed, right? The Inspect tool, you can check that as well. So if you see this same thing here, the Postman tutorial, right? You can, I think it has this link. You can download, use this link. Postman tutorial. This is the REST API, right? So here there are steps how to install Postman. Right? There's other features in Postman like using collections. Collection is nothing but a kind of a folder. You can group like, so if you are working on 2, 3 projects, you can group them into different collections. So you can put all related requests into one folder. That is a collection. Collaboration, you can share it, share these requests with other teams, right? And all that. Creation of tests, automation, you don't need to worry about this. So at this time, you just understand how to use this get, put, and post, post, put, and delete. So they gave
Okay,
like
sir.
some instructions how to install Postman.
Sir, need to cover this installation part also in test cases, not required.
No, no, no. This you don't need to cover these in the test cases.
Okay.
Test cases is only this execution. That's it. We can tell like I executed this API call using Postman, right? This is a tool, right? This is not this tool you are not testing. You are only testing that API. We can basically put a screenshot of this get request and the output, and you can mention like I tested this API through Postman tool. That should be enough. Because the Postman tool is you don't need to test the tool itself. You just need to test the API only.
First, we have to click on new. In that new, we have to take a get request, right, sir?
Yeah, you can just take like new request and then you can just put some name, any name. And,
Okay.
I
And
think
the request description, sir?
just the name, right? You can just put some description, right? They mentioned like what fetching some employee records, right? You can just put that name. It's basically some fetching some company data, right? So you can
Yes,
just
sir.
say put some description there, fetching employee records. You can just put in the description. This API will fetch employee records from database.
Okay, sir. Need to create folder or not required, sir?
No, you can. It's optional. They won't see that these all these things because that is in your local only. This folder and all.
Okay.
Right? We can just maybe put a name like whatever that company name, right, on the folder. Right?
Okay, sir.
So okay.
Sir, I will write test cases for both scenarios, sir. I will. Can you review tomorrow, sir? I will send to you.
Which one?
Uh, I I got task no, sir.
Okay.
Regarding the task, I will write test cases for both manual and API. I will
Okay.
send review for you, sir. Can you please review
Okay.
and
Yeah. Once you are
okay.
done, send me. I will take a look.
Sure, sir.
So
Thank you.
here all the steps are there. How to execute API request. Give like all the detailed steps. You can go through that. How to run get request, right? So is the first step. You select get here, put the URL here, right? Click the send button, check the status, check the output. for GET request. These are for 5 steps, right? Select HTTP request to GET, put in the request URL, put the link, click the send button, then you get 200 message, then you get results in the body, actual
Okay,
results in the
sir.
body. This is the GET request. Similarly, post, right? So while creating, you can create from new request from here with plus icon, or you can like create from here. Anywhere you see plus icon, you can create a new request. So create a plus icon, select post, put the URL in the body, right? Switch to the body tab. This is the body tab, right? This is the body tab. So you put the JSON format, select the JSON format, like each request. So whenever they say post request, right, they will have like supporting format. It can be text, plain text, or JSON format. You need to ask developer what kind of format the API will accept, right? This is JSON, select JSON, and put the sample object, right? You need to create this sample object and put it in the body section. So each this object will change based on the API definition, right? So you can put it in the body section. Then you can send that request. So this is how you do, like JSON, select format, put the body, the object in the body, then you can click the send button. So you get like send 201. Now you get like 201. It's created. Object is created. So in the GET request, we're getting like 200. Right here, we're getting 201. Right? If you see here the codes. So 201 is created. Like new record is created. So that is the expected output. Right? 201, and you will get some ID for the new record. That is the output.
Okay, sir.
So this is some additional parameterization. I think we don't need it now. So you can read it later. So instead of every time giving URL, you can just put some parameter name and then save that URL under parameter name. Right. So you can go through the steps. I think this is so this is some little advanced, but like yeah, just try this. Right, once you understand, right, these are basically grouping them into different categories for later use, right? This little advanced stuff. The same way, how to create collections, right? How to create collections. So you can like see in Postman, you can run all these. So when you put in the collection in a sequence, right, you can run the whole sequence and all that. So that's what he is explaining. But as long as right now, if you know like how to run these individual requests, this is enough.
Okay.
Right? You can just try with this URL that they gave here. I think post request, right? You can try this URL. This URL you can try it, right? Using this object, this
Okay, sir.
format. So that will give that. So similarly for put and so it is a put request, again same thing, right? You going to select put the URL here. So in the body there will be object. Then you're going to send it. Once you send it, you get the response back and the updated record ID, something like that. Same thing for delete also. Delete also will have the same. We get delete URL and put the body. It takes some parameters. You can pass the parameter, or you can put a body text, and the type of the object is JSON. Application JSON. You click send. So that should work. I think. Right. So try that. Write the scenarios. Then maybe once you're done, send me. I will take a look and update.
Sure, sir. Thank
This
you.
is clear, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very
Yeah.
clear.
So you can watch that tutorials for the Postman. Like if you want to understand these points, I don't think it's required for your test right now, but probably later on you can go through this other stuff, how to parameterize requests, how to create collections, all these things later on, right?
Okay, sir.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
Sir, as of now, no, sir. I will write test cases for both manual and API, and I will send to you, sir.
Okay. Fine. Okay then. Fine. Talk to you later.
Thank you, sir. Bye, sir.